British Columbia is world-renowned for its natural beauty, diverse communities, and thriving culture. It's also known for being in the grips of a housing affordability crisis decades in the making, which has been compounded by a poison drug crisis and by the COVID-19 pandemic. The province has an ambitious plan to address the crisis through the largest investment in housing affordability in BC's history. Tasked with building tens of thousands of homes in hundreds of communities is BC Housing, the province's agency responsible for developing, managing, and administering a wide range of subsidized housing and homelessness services across the province. BC Housing doesn't do this alone. To address the challenge, they're working with hundreds of partners. In this podcast, you'll get to hear from those delivering innovative and exciting affordable housing solutions. I'm Sara from BC Housing, and this is Let's Talk Housing. New supportive housing often meets pushback from residents, business owners, and local politicians who are worried about crime, drug use, homelessness, and impact on property values. On today's episode, we'll discuss what it's like to bring new supportive housing projects to a community. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we're recording this podcast on the ancestral homelands of hundreds of Indigenous peoples and nations across British Columbia, each with their own unique traditions and histories. Today, I am on the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, who have been the caretakers of these lands for thousands of years. We offer respect to their peoples, past and present. Also, in full transparency, this episode is being recorded in October 2021 and reflects the issues at that time. Joining us today on Let's Talk Housing is Kim Galloway, Chief Operating Officer and Head of Housing for Ask Wellness Society, which provides health, housing, and employment services for marginalized people in Kamloops, Penticton, and Merritt, cities in the interior region of British Columbia. Also joining us is Alfred Achoba, the Acting Executive Director of the Canadian Mental Health Association Kamloops branch. He has firsthand experience managing controversial supportive housing in Kamloops and dealing with confusion and hostility in the community. Rounding out our panel on Let's Talk Housing is Carmin Mazzotta, the Social, Housing, and Community Development Manager for the City of Kamloops. He works closely with BC Housing and with nonprofit housing providers, such as Ask Wellness and CMHA. Thank you all for being here today. Kim, let's start with you. There's often confusion about the term supportive housing. Given that Ask manages supportive housing buildings in several communities, can you tell us what is supportive housing?
I think it's really important to recognize that supportive housing it's not just bricks and mortar. It really is, it's a belief that housing is a human right, and that when we provide housing with supports, that we can support folks to get well. And so I think everything we do in our supportive housing complexes is around supporting people to do well. It's not just about putting a roof over someone's head. Of course, that's really important, but it's the collaborative nature and how we operate our supportive housing that is the beauty and the magic of what we do. I think prior to folks getting into supportive housing, I think it's important that we recognize that there's intention and is very well thought out as to how we select folks who will be housed in supportive housing. So we're looking at folks who are in need of mental health and substance use supports, some physical chronic health conditions, and folks that are going to be able to connect with our staff. Rent in supportive housing, it's $375. So we have robust activity with mental health and substance use clinicians, brain injury support staff, care aides, home health nurses, and it's that significant collaborative effort that actually provides that opportunity for folks to see that they can get well. That's the beauty of supportive housing. It's not just that roof over the head. It's that opportunity to be part of a society, be part of our community. I think that there's so many folks that get referred to supportive housing that are really socially isolated and marginalized. And we give an opportunity for someone to say, hey, I matter. I'm important. And that's, I think, the magic of supportive housing is when we recognize that we're not just about providing a roof over the head. It is really providing acceptance and hope for tomorrow.
Yeah, that's really great way to start us off, Kim. And I'd like us to actually now take a moment to hear from someone who lives in supportive housing. Let's Talk Housing was able to speak with Quentin, who lives in Rosethorn, one of the supportive housing buildings that your organization manages. And Quentin was kind enough to share what his experience has been like in supportive housing. Let's take a listen.
Having help with my medication is one big thing. Just being able to get into a routine, having a cycle every day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They feed us here, which is amazing. So I don't food isn't really a worry right now. Yeah, I can chip away at my debt, and I can save for things I actually want. I can put money towards my kids. Everybody at the front desk is always amazing too. They're always so helpful. They'll come and just to have somebody check on you too. There's a lot of people here dealing with substance abuse and stuff like that too. And just to be able to know that there's somebody there watching, or I don't know, if something bad happens, or there's 24/7 on-site supervision too as well, like cameras and stuff. So there's a lot of safety here. It already has benefited my future in so many ways. Just being able to have a chance. It's basically giving me a second chance. So it's helping me keep my head above water and maintain a normal life after everything that I've been through. And it's helping me build my future beyond what I thought was possible.
It sounds like supportive housing has played a very pivotal role for Quentin. Alfred, when you listened to Quentin's story, what resonated for you?
Thank you. We hear the same story, a story of hope, a story of support, a story of, being able to have a second chance. And that's what supportive housing is all about, is that we serve as stewards for our clients, to thrive in their housing. And so we bring in all the supports they need, unique to each individual. And stories like Quentins is what resonates for us, is being able to give people hope, hope to be able to do better, hope to be able to find employment, hope to be able to stay housed, and all the other life skills and supports that we have in supportive housing. We have supports tailored to Indigenous clients that would help them reconnect to their culture. We have supports for folks who have lost, touch with community, and we try to integrate them back into it. So, there's so much value in supportive housing, and it's more than housing. It's more than just having a roof over your head. It's the fact that you have 24/7 support from staff who are there to help you from a genuine standpoint. It's the fact that you have, all your services in place in one spot. And I say to people, supportive housing is the best housing you can find in our community, because you can thrive there. It's different from an apartment. In an apartment, when you struggle, you're on your own. In supportive housing, you have really specialized care. You have, staff with multidisciplinary skills, that can help you with all those challenges. So, we see so much result and so much goals from folks who stay in supportive housing. And we need more in our community, wherever we can make one.
Alfred, I think I just want to piggyback on that. When I think of our folks that are homeless and just the talk of that street rat race and just surviving. And, you think, if you're concerned about, where am I going to sleep tonight? When we talk about the vulnerability assessment tool, so many people talk about, I lose my things. I don't feel safe. They're sleeping in parks. They're sleeping in parking lots. And how can anyone focus on addressing their mental health and substance use concerns when all they're worried about is surviving? And I think that housing stabilizes and gives people an opportunity to address really their needs.
Carmin, I'd like to bring you in here. In your work with the city, you work to provide housing to people who need it. And at the same time, you also have to manage concerns coming from potential neighbors. How does the city balance that?
I think first off, it's really important for us to be able to convey the level of need in the community. So there's tools like housing needs assessments and point in time counts, but more so than that, it's how do we communicate that information out. And so I think partly there's an education role. So, bringing in data-driven, evidence-based practices that have been promising and shown results in other jurisdictions. One of the things we're working on right now with the city is, for example, a land use analysis where we look at shelter and social housing sites, not in terms of where they should be located from just social planning principles of meeting people where they're at, and also proximity to transit services and amenities, but also some community planning principles. So around looking at, mix of incomes in different neighborhoods and things like that. So I think there's a piece there around that strategic planning piece in community that the city can play. I think as well, there's also a role around empathy building and anti-stigma work, really helping to frame the narrative as it really is, as a human rights issue, that, folks have a right to housing. And also, I think as well, there's an opportunity here. When we think of public services and infrastructure, we often think of parks and roads and sidewalks and bike lanes and things like that, water and sewer. But I think there's an education piece here around framing housing when we think of affordable housing, supportive housing as part of that public infrastructure. And part of that is looking at, for example, in Kamloops, in the 2016 census, we don't have the recent census data, nearly 50% of renters were living in unaffordable housing at the time. And we know housing costs have risen dramatically since then. So I think it's really important to convey that supportive housing, subsidized housing across the continuum, there is this need for this public investment that is something that's affecting a majority of, say, renters and also thousands of homeowners in our community and other communities in the province. So I really do think that the city, by playing an education role, by playing a role around bringing the data, but also doing some empathy building work in partnership with our nonprofit service providers, and also with, say, Thompson Rivers University, right? We're working with a researcher in residence there around some of this work, and that I think bringing those conversations into community in a way where you bring the education piece, so you help elevate the conversation, but also doing some empathy building work to really fight against some of those stigmatizing, more reactive narratives.
You've raised some important themes there, Carmin, about the role of education and awareness. Now, of course, it starts to get real when we're actually opening a supportive housing building. Alfred, you went through this recently. Can you tell us about how you dealt with fear and misinformation when CMHA opened Rosethorn?
Yeah, Rosethorn opened, a few months before the pandemic. And so, it was a bit stressful for us, given that, after we opened, COVID, was declared a pandemic. But we opened in an area in town where, in most people's mind, was over-concentrated with social services, from every corner. And prior to Rosethorn being built, we had pushback from the community. And when we opened, we experienced firsthand that hostile interaction, from the neighbors, from the community. And most of it was fed through misinformation out there. There were rumors going around on the type of clients at Rosethorn. There was misinformation, saying, Rosethorn, stolen properties were being stored at Rosethorn. There was misinformation as to the type of services we provide at Rosethorn. And so, it was hard to fight all this misinformation at once. And so part of what we did was to gradually roll out our response. First was releasing outcomes around the type of supports we have. and the type of progress we're seeing with our clients. And then we did more of an education piece for the community around what supportive housing is, with our partners like the CD and BC Housing and Ask Wellness, and CMHA, all the other branches. And we also, educated our clients around the impacts of our program in the neighborhood and the role they could play. And so, with all three messages, we started to see a change in dynamics, and also a change in the misinformation out there. People were willing to go out and seek the information that, we had because it was readily accessible. But also our clients were able to fight for their housing, to go out there and fight the misinformation. So we created our own peer program. And these are individuals from Roston who go around cleaning up the neighborhood, but also engaging the business owners and the neighbors around what housing looks like to them. And so, we saw so much value in bringing in all our allies, but we also saw value in the clients defending their right to housing, just like every other person. And we're starting to see a shift in dynamics for the neighbors we have on West Victoria. Most of them are willing to come in and sit with us. Most of them are willing to find solutions. I think the other thing that led to, this negative stereotype for Roston was, we heard at the time that, the corrections here had closed down and people were allowed to leave. And so there was a misinformation out there that crime went up when Roston opened. But we worked with our partners like the RCMP and bylaws around, some safety measures. The city did a crime prevention through environmental design to look at what factors were playing a role in the increase in crime. And at no point did the results show that these were clients from Roston or these were clients from any other program. Folks were lost at the time with COVID, and we were seeing such a high demand in services, which led to so many people coming into our area of town. But Roston has kept to its promise, which is being an inclusive building, but also a building that gives people hope for our community, but also hope to be good neighbors wherever we are.
That's so positive. And it's so positive to hear how people's perceptions can change, really, especially when they meet their neighbors, when they see what actually happens when housing comes to a community. Can we know that research shows that bringing in supportive housing helps stabilize people's lives? It does not lead to increases in crime. It has no impact on property values. Can you just touch briefly on whether or not you've seen the same trend where once housing opens, people's fears don't come to pass?
When we opened Sparrow House in Kamloops, definitely we experienced the same situation that Alfred and the CMHA team did. And I think it's the responsibility partially of housing provider in collaboration with our city and BC Housing partners to really help our communities understand who we are housing and accept that there are fears. When people don't know something, of course they're going to be scared or they're going to have questions. And so I think the best thing that we can do is we just address concerns head on. And we talk a lot about the community as our client, not just the clients that are in our housing facilities. I have been in Kamloops almost all my life. I love my city, and I have raised children here, and I want my city to be safe. I want my city to be beautiful, and I want, for me as a person who lives here, but also as part of Ask Wellness Society, I recognize that the community is our client, and it's important that we really do want to take on that role of being a healthy neighbor.
Carmin, can you help us conclude by sharing lessons that Kamloops has learned that might be helpful for other municipalities that are developing supportive housing?
Well, again, I think the importance of the city playing a role in terms of that education piece is huge, right? That we really need to combat some of the narratives, the misinformation that's out there. And I think as Alfred and Kim have provided great examples today of how this work is and supportive housing in general is can be so life changing for folks, right? So I see a strong role for a municipality in that, and Kamloops, like we're a work in progress. I mean, that's the reality, as are many BC municipalities. So I that's one of the key pieces for us that we're going to be working on into the next year. And really, I think municipalities play a role in terms of some of that strategic planning and coordination work. We tend to get, drawn into and into this cycle of responding to concerns, which is great. You need to respond to concerns, but getting into this cycle of that can be reactive. And again, by doing some of that educational work to address community concerns and dispel misinformation and dispel some of the narratives that are out there that just aren't as informed, right? And again, it's about elevating that conversation. And I would encourage municipalities, and we're, I think, going to see some real benefits in our community in the next year with this partnership that we have with Thompson Rivers University, with the researcher in residence there. Because often, at a municipal level, it's a capacity issue, right? Your social planning teams may not be, very, very large, right? And you may be going flat out. So again, you're leveraging those relationships, finding partners at the university, and also again, really working with and recognizing the great work of the nonprofit community. In our case in Kamloops, I mean, as I'm sure it's in other communities, but I'm just really struck by the incredible collaboration and innovative work and just dedication and commitment to the vulnerable populations they serve that Ask Wellness and CMHA and our other nonprofit service providers are engaged in all the time. And I think, it's really important to recognize that, and to recognize that as we've been going through and are still going through, for example, the opioid crisis, that is something where you have frontline nonprofit service providers building relationships with folks over a period of time, and then losing folks to that opioid crisis, right? And that's incredibly taxing on and hard on those folks. And so whatever we can do, and I think there is still a lot more to be done, but whatever we can do to support the nonprofits and to dispel some of the misinformation, and to really provide that educational piece, provide that dialogue, provide that narrative to counter some of the misinformation, while at the same time going out there, doing the engagement around it, and hearing and acknowledging community concerns, right? That's the key piece, right? And so, whether it's, another example would be something like, this narrative that when supportive housing is built, it drives down, say, property values in an area. Well, evidence shows that's quite the opposite. So if you can bring in some local data, which we're doing right now in partnership with Thompson Rivers University, around showing that when supportive housing is built, it's often built on vacant or underutilized sites. And those vacant, underutilized sites are actually having an impact on the market. When the supportive housing goes in, we don't see a drop in, say, real estate values. And I think we've shown the nonprofit providers and how they've managed their sites with Rosethorn, with Sparrow, with other sites, this concern around increased, crime, vandalism, safety, and security concerns. it often doesn't bear out, right? It's the vacant sites and unsafe spaces that existed prior that are actually contributing to more of that impact. So, I just can't stress it enough. And again, we are definitely, I would say, a work in progress right now. And I really looking forward to, in the next year, some of the work that we can do to support the great work of our nonprofit service providers.
Thank you so much. This has been a really informative conversation. I'd like to thank Kim Galloway, Alfred Achoba, Carmin Mazzotta for joining us on Let's Talk Housing. And I'd also like to thank Quentin for sharing his story. Let's talk again soon. To learn how to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit our website, bchousing.org. You can also call us at 1-800-257-7756. That's 1-800-257-7756.